Hey everybody, I'm Ashleigh Banfield, and this is Drop Dead Serious, and holy moly, this is a bonus episode I was not expecting to bring you tonight, but I'm going to muddle through it because the news is just breaking as we speak. The man accused of killing 4 college students in Moscow, Idaho, as you all know, has pleaded guilty. He's confessed to doing it. But Bryan Kohberger, even after admitting to one of the most brutal crimes in recent memory, apparently still isn't done fighting. Pour yourself a drink, or do your woo-saws, or meditate for a hot minute, because I seriously can't believe that I am going to bring you this information right now. But this time, it's not about guilt. It's not about innocence. It's about knowledge. It's about you and me finally hearing the rest of his awful story. It's about the gag order. You probably know that the prosecution is no longer opposing the motion from a whole bunch of media outlets to lift the gag order. But in a new filing, the Latah County prosecutor says that since Kohberger has pleaded guilty, his right to a fair trial is no longer an issue, right? However, out of respect for the victims' family members, prosecutors say that they're not going to make any public statements until after the sentencing is done. That's great. It makes perfect sense. I get it. Kohbergers Lawyers, though, they don't feel the same way. Kohbergers Lawyers just filed a brand new motion today, urging the judge not to lift the non-dissemination order, not to lift the gag order. The gag order that's been in place for 2.5 years, keeping prosecutors, defense lawyers, and the police, and anybody else who's associated with this case from talking to the press. And the reason that they say the gag order needs to stay in place all the way through to sentencing instead of maybe being lifted, tomorrow, because the circus is only getting louder in Bryan Kohberger's lawyer's opinion. They say the stakes are still dangerously high. For Bryan Kohberger, not for the rest of us, just for him. And what the defense is really pointing to in the motion that they filed today is that there are threats out there to Bryan Kohberger, obviously, his family. What? And if you can believe it, court staff. I don't know who the court staff are, and the motion doesn't make it clear. They say court staff. And when I hear court staff, I think maybe Bill Thompson and the prosecutor's team, because people are pissed. Prosecutors offered a deal to this guy. He skated on the death penalty, even though prosecutors had him dead to rights, at least it seemed. So maybe there are threats to Bill Thompson and his office, and that's what Ann Taylor is bringing up in this defense motion. Maybe there are threats to the judge. How dare you let this happen? Some people are just so irrational. They'll just go after a judge, right? But here's my question. Does Ann Taylor think that the minute the gag order is lifted and we start hearing the real details, that those real details are so much worse than what we already know, that we're all going to lose our ever-loving minds, and that people are literally going to take to the streets with the pitchforks and the flaming torches? Are the facts in this case, under seal right now, under this gag order, are they so much worse than what we already think that the public is going to explode in a rage? Because that's what this motion seems to point out. Here's what's in the filing and why it matters. Kohberger's legal team, including lead attorney Ann Taylor, filed a 4-page opposition to the media's motion to get rid of the gag order, to vacate it, and to just let the information flow free. Because you know what? Quite frankly, the whole reason for it in the beginning was because they were really worried that the whole world was going to find out a whole bunch of information about this case, and that some of those people in the whole world would potentially be jurors, and that they'd be poisoned by all this information before it could come out in a court of law. So, you got to protect the process. You got to make sure the jury pool stays pristine. So, gag order. So what would be wrong with lifting the gag order now? Because there's not going to be a jury. Poisoning a jury pool is no longer a concern. Why do we need to wait till sentencing? We know what the sentence is. But his lawyers, Bryan Kohberger's lawyers, make the argument that the case is not over. Even though Kohberger has pleaded guilty, they say his constitutional rights still hang in the balance, especially when it comes to sentencing. And sentencing is legally a, quote, critical stage of the process. And that means that Bryan Kohberger still has the right to effective legal counsel. That's important. Effective legal counsel. Those words are important because usually what happens when something goes a way that a defendant doesn't like, they throw a Hail Mary and they say, I want to fight because I had ineffective assistance of counsel. Ineffective assistance of counsel is every defendant's Hail Mary to say, I don't like the way this thing happened and it's my lawyer's fault. So there's Ann Taylor saying Kohberger still has the right to effective legal counsel. And his attorneys say that the media frenzy could interfere with that right. Okay, so I'm trying to work it out. Because at sentencing, that's when Bryan Kohberger has agreed to the deal whereby he can never appeal again. He can't raise that whole ineffective assistance of counsel. But before sentencing, I guess he could. I guess he could jack with us, right? I guess Bryan Kohberger, if he's scheming and having fun with this whole process, I guess he could jack with us. I guess he could say, hey, ho, wait, before you impose that sentence I agreed to, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to change my mind. And I'm going to file a motion for ineffective assistance of counsel because these ladies over here, they dropped the gag order before sentencing and the media went bananas. And now I don't think I want to go through with the deal that I agreed to because sentencing hasn't happened yet. I think I can see the point. I think I can see the point of Bryan Kohberger's lawyers. They're smart and they are good at their job. Ann Taylor is one of the best. Those attorneys point to this ongoing release of high-profile media projects like, the Peacock docuseries. It's called The Idaho Student Murders. Then there was the big series that was just released on July 11th, Amazon Prime. That one was called One Night in Idaho. Not to mention the new James Patterson book that's just released. And they also mentioned that Dateline episode, the big Dateline episode that aired in May, tons of leaked information. It triggered a court-ordered records hold and an active investigation into who the leakers were, who leaked all the confidential information that was supposed to be protected by the gag order. Kohberger's lawyers say that lifting this gag order now, just days before sentencing, would only pour gasoline on the fire. And the fire, they argue, is already blazing. They say that there have been threats against Bryan Kohberger, that there have been threats against Kohberger's family. Come on, people. It's not their fault. Don't threaten his family. Apparently, court staff have been targets of something, but the threats apparently are escalating against court staff. Let me read directly from the defense motion where the argument is being made that lifting the gag order is somehow dangerous to Bryan Kohberger's safety. Quote, the amount of publicity coming before sentencing, even with the revised order in place, is massive. Further release would only serve to gin up the anger and violent rhetoric already at a fever pitch. Again, this court is well aware of the threats posed not only to Mr. Kohberger, but to his family and to court staff. End quote. Holy shit. Internet, back off. Leave the court staff alone. They're doing their jobs. Leave the Kohberger family alone. I look at them as victims too. Bryan Kohberger should be the sole direction of all ire. The guy that admitted to it, the monster who did these horrible things, just him, not his lawyer, not the court, not the staff, not the judge, and certainly not his parents or his sisters. Kohberger's lawyers also said that court resources are already stretched thin, that security was already maxed out when the court met on July 2nd. And with sentencing expected to take 2 full days, they say public safety could take a major hit if the order is lifted now. To which I respond, Ann Taylor and team, I love you to pieces. My God, you're good at your jobs. You've done everything that any defendant could ever want. You have done the greatest job of a defense attorney. You really have. You really committed to the Constitution of the United States. You gave him such amazing defense, right? You just did everything. You looked under every rock and you went through every crevice to save a man's life because that was your job. However, I don't know what the fuck you're saying. With danger to Bryan Kohberger and court resources stretched thin, what exactly was the plan during trial, right? Because every single day of a 4-month trial, there was going to be explosive testimony and evidence made public. What was the plan for his security then? How is it any different than right fucking now? I don't get that at all. Screw Bryan Kohberger's safety. The issue is not his safety with a dissemination order, being lifted. This part just doesn't make any sense. You are going to have a 4-month trial. That's going to be way more dangerous than lifting a non-dissemination order now for a couple of days before sentencing. Safety? How could it be any different than at trial? Okay, maybe I'm missing something, and Ann Taylor, please call me if I'm missing something. And here's where the defense motion today also gets interesting. Kohbergers lawyers accuse the prosecution of trying to look like the grown-ups in the room, claiming that the state now withdraws its request to keep the gag order in place, quote, out of respect for the victims and the judicial process. Kohbergers lawyers are calling BS on that. They point out that when the prosecution states that it promises not to speak to the press, that's vague. It's vague, they say. Vague at best. Does that include attorneys, support staff, all 150 law enforcement officers involved in the case? Kohberger's attorneys say that if you were in the courtroom on July 2nd, you would know that an entire row of courtroom gallery was filled with law enforcement. And Kohberger's team is asking the obvious question. If the order is lifted, what's stopping any of them from giving interviews the minute they leave the courtroom? To which I say, right, yeah, exactly. It's a public process. They're public officers. This is a public proceeding. We're the public and we've been left out of it. The filing wraps with this. Kohberger's asking for the judge to keep the order in place until after the sentencing. His attorneys argue that it is reasonable, it's narrowly tailored, and it doesn't actually prevent the media from covering the case. It just stops the parties from fueling the chaos. Bullshit! Yeah, the media has been prevented from covering the case because we don't even know who the witnesses are half the time. We don't even know what the investigators found in that house. We don't even know half the stuff that led to Bryan Kohberger, right? Or what they had on him, or why they saw it necessary to sign a deal with him instead of going through with a death penalty case. Why? What was it that changed your mind, right? Prosecutors, what the hell was it that made you cut a deal? Because for the rest of us, with the limited information we have, it looked like dead to rights. I mean, it looked like you had him slam dunk. What was it? I guess that's under the gag order. His lawyers say that keeping the gag order in place is the only way to protect the integrity of the process and the safety of everyone involved. Maybe you're partly right, Ann Taylor. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is a possibility that before sentencing, Bryan Kohberger could throw a fucking wrench into all of this and say, ineffective assistance of counsel before I give up my right to appeal forever and ever. Before you lay that sentence on me, I got one more knife that I want to stick into the process and fuck with everybody. Maybe you're right. And so maybe keeping the gag order in place until sentencing will protect us all from him being able to do that. But the rest of it, the security of Bryan Kohberger, fuck him. I honestly do not care about the security of Bryan Kohberger. I really don't. And I probably speak for a lot of people when I say, I hope he gets shanked in prison so he knows what it feels like, what he did to those 4 kids. So is the judge going to lift the gag order? We should know very soon. The sentencing is set for July 23rd. The courtroom's already bracing for an onslaught of media, victim impact statements, and possibly new details that we've never heard before. The moment the gag order lifts, whenever it is, tomorrow, sentencing, the floodgates will open. And if you're wondering what might spill out, we're going to be right here to break it all down and to go back to the beginning to see if it squares with what we thought we knew then. I'm Ashleigh Banfield. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so appreciative. Sorry when I release the F-bombs, but I get really pissed. I'm really invested in this. I care about those families. I care about those people whose lives have just been turned upside down, that will never be the same anymore. I care about those friends. I care about those surviving roommates who the internet decided to shred. They deserve the best. They deserve all care and concern. They don't deserve to hear that Bryan Kohberger's safety is paramount. It's not. It isn't. He's a ruthless, vile monster. He's a horrifying killer who skated from having 5 to 7 marksmen aim their rifles at his heart and take aim and fire. He skated from that. So whatever he gets in prison from now on, that's the system. That's the way it is. And the rest of us, we don't owe him a dime. But maybe Ann Taylor's right. Maybe her sick, twisted, motherfucking client does have something else up his sleeve. Ineffective assistance of counsel before the gavel comes down. So maybe she's right. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Ashleigh Banfield. And remember, the truth isn't just serious. It's drop dead serious.